Question 1. An auditor is reviewing an organization's process for learning from incidents. The organization has a documented procedure for incident investigation and corrective action. During the audit, the auditor observes that, while near misses are investigated and recorded, the corrective actions implemented are often superficial, addressing only the immediate cause rather than underlying systemic issues. Furthermore, the organization does not appear to systematically analyze trends across multiple incidents to identify recurring hazards or weaknesses in its OSMs. Which of the following best reflects the auditor's finding regarding the organization's effectiveness in learning from incidents according to ISO 45001/2018 requirements? Option A. The organization's incident learning process is deficient because it fails to conduct thorough root cause analysis for all incidents and lacks a systematic approach to trend analysis, thereby hindering the identification and elimination of systemic OHS risks. Option B. The auditor's observation indicates a potential lack of resources allocated to incident investigation, which is a common challenge in many organizations and does not necessarily point to a failure in the OSMs itself. Option C. The organization's learning from incidents is adequate because the focus is on immediate corrective actions, which are typically sufficient to prevent recurrence of minor incidents. Option D. The organization has effectively implemented its incident investigation procedure, as all reported incidents are documented and assigned corrective actions, fulfilling the minimum requirements of the standard. The correct answer is A. The organization's incident learning process is deficient because it fails to conduct thorough root cause analysis for all incidents and lacks a systematic approach to trend analysis, thereby hindering the identification and elimination of systemic OHS risks. Explanation. The core principle of learning from incidents within an occupational health and safety management system, guided by ISO 45001/2018, is to prevent recurrence and foster continuous improvement. Clause 10. 2. Incident and nonconformity mandates that an organization shall establish a process to record, investigate, and review incidents. This process should also identify opportunities for improvement and determine if corrective actions are needed. The objective is not merely to find fault but to understand the root causes, contributing factors, and systemic weaknesses that allowed the incident to occur. This understanding then informs the development and implementation of effective preventive and corrective actions. An auditor's role is to verify that this process is not just documented but actively functioning and demonstrably leading to positive changes in the organization's safety performance. Focusing on the effectiveness of the implemented corrective actions and the systematic review of incident data to identify trends and systemic issues are key indicators of a mature OSMs. Simply documenting an incident or identifying a direct cause without a robust follow-up on corrective action effectiveness and systemic learning misses the fundamental intent of the standard. Question 2. When conducting an audit of an organization's compliance with ISO 45001/2018 Clause 6, 1, 3, legal and other requirements, what is the primary focus for the auditor to determine the effectiveness of the organization's OSMs in managing these obligations? Option A. The thoroughness of the legal register's content, including historical legislation and international conventions, not directly applicable to the organization's specific jurisdiction. Option B. The documented procedure for identifying, accessing, and updating applicable legal and other requirements, and evidence of its consistent application in operational planning and control. Option C. The number of legal contraventions identified by regulatory bodies in the past fiscal year, irrespective of the organization's internal OSMs. Option D. The frequency of legal compliance training provided to all employees, without verifying the integration of this training into specific job tasks and risk mitigation. The correct answer is B. The documented procedure for identifying, accessing, and updating applicable legal and other requirements, and evidence of its consistent application in operational planning and control. Explanation. The core of auditing ISO 45001/2018, particularly concerning the auditor's role in assessing compliance with legal and other requirements, Clause 6, 1, 3, involves verifying that the organization has a process to identify, access, and understand applicable legal requirements and other requirements relevant to its OSMs. This includes not only identifying current laws, but also anticipating changes and ensuring the OSMS incorporates these. When auditing the effectiveness of this process, an auditor must look beyond mere identification. They need to ascertain how these identified requirements are translated into operational controls, training programs, and performance monitoring. The auditor's objective is to confirm that the organization's OSMS is robust enough to ensure ongoing conformity with legal obligations. This involves examining evidence of legal review, the integration of legal requirements into risk assessments and operational planning, and mechanisms for staying updated on legislative amendments. The auditor is not responsible for interpreting the law, but for verifying the organization's system for managing its legal obligations. Therefore, the most critical aspect of the auditor's evaluation is the demonstrated capability of the organization to consistently meet its legal and other obligations through its OSMS. Question 3. When auditing an organization's adherence to ISO 45001, 2018, specifically concerning the context of the organization, Clause 4. 1. What is the primary focus for an auditor when evaluating the effectiveness of the OH&S management system's foundation? Option A. Ensuring that the organization has implemented a robust communication strategy to disseminate its OH&S policy to all employees, irrespective of whether the policy is informed by the contextual analysis. Option B. Confirming that the organization has established a comprehensive list of all potential hazards within its operational scope, regardless of their relevance to external or internal contextual factors. Option C. Verifying that the organization has systematically identified and analyzed both internal and external issues relevant to its OH&S objectives, and has documented how these issues influence its OH&S management system. Option D. Assessing the organization's compliance with all applicable national OH&S legislation, without a specific requirement to link this compliance to the broader contextual understanding. The correct answer is C. Verifying that the organization has systematically identified and analyzed both internal and external issues relevant to its OH&S objectives, and has documented how these issues influence its OH&S management system. Explanation. The fundamental purpose of understanding the context of the organization within ISO 45001-2018 is to identify external and internal issues that are relevant to the organization's purpose and its strategic direction, and that affect its ability to achieve the intended outcomes of its occupational health and safety (O&S) management system. This involves considering a broad range of factors that can influence the OH&S performance. Clause 4. 1. Understanding the organization and its context mandates this process. An auditor must verify that the organization has considered these contextual factors when establishing, implementing, maintaining, and continually improving its OH&S management system. This includes understanding the legal and other requirements applicable to the organization, as stipulated in Clause 6. 1. 3. Therefore, when assessing an organization's OH&S management system, an auditor should look for evidence that the organization has systematically identified and analyzed both internal factors, e.g., organizational culture, policies, resources, capabilities, and external factors, e.g., legal, technological, market, cultural, social, economic environments, and the needs and expectations of interested parties. The correct approach for an auditor is to evaluate the comprehensiveness and effectiveness of this identification and analysis process, ensuring it informs the OH&S policy, objectives, and risk assessment. The organization must also determine which of these issues are relevant to its OH&S management system and how they will be addressed. Question 4. During an audit of a manufacturing facility, an auditor observes that while an OHS committee exists and meets regularly, worker feedback collected through suggestion boxes is rarely acknowledged or acted upon, and there is a general perception among the workforce that their safety concerns are not taken seriously by frontline supervisors. Which aspect of leadership and worker participation, as defined by ISO 45001-2018, is most likely deficient in this organization? Option A. The regular dissemination of OHS performance data and information to all workers. Option B. The provision of adequate resources for the OHS management system, including training for OHS committee members. Option C. The organization's commitment to fostering a culture where worker participation is actively encouraged and their input genuinely influences OHS decision-making. Option D. The establishment of a formal OHS committee with defined terms of reference and meeting schedules. The correct answer is C. The organization's commitment to fostering a culture where worker participation is actively encouraged and their input genuinely influences OHS decision-making. Explanation. The principle of leadership and worker participation in ISO 45001-2018 is foundational for an effective occupational health and safety OS management system. Clause 5. 4. Consultation and participation of workers. In Clause 5, 1. Leadership and commitment outline the requirements. Leadership is responsible for establishing, implementing, and maintaining the OHS policy and objectives, and ensuring the integration of the OHS management system into business processes. This includes providing resources and promoting a culture where workers can contribute to OHS improvements. Worker participation is not merely informing workers. It involves their active involvement in all aspects of the OHS management system, from hazard identification and risk assessment to incident investigation and the development of controls. This participation must be effective, meaning workers have the opportunity to express their views, concerns, and suggestions, and that these are considered by management. The auditor must verify that mechanisms are in place for this participation, such as OHS committees, worker representatives, and clear channels for communication. The effectiveness of these mechanisms is judged by their ability to influence OHS decision-making and drive positive outcomes. Simply having a committee or a suggestion box does not guarantee compliance if workers do not feel empowered or if their input is not genuinely acted upon. The auditor looks for evidence that worker input is actively sought, considered, and demonstrably influences the OHS management system's performance and improvements, aligning with the spirit of Clause 5. 4, which emphasizes consultation and participation at all applicable levels and functions. Question 5. During an audit of a manufacturing facility, an auditor observes that a new chemical substance, recently introduced into the production process, has not undergone a formal documented risk assessment as required by the organization's established OH&S procedures, which are themselves aligned with ISO 45001-2018 Clause 8. 1. 2. The auditor also notes that employees handling the substance are not wearing the specified personal protective equipment, PPE, as outlined in the Provisional Safety Data Sheet. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the auditor to take to ensure the integrity of their audit findings? Option A. Note the observation as a minor finding and recommend a follow-up audit specifically focused on chemical hazard management within the next quarter. Option B. Document the observed lack of risk assessment and incorrect PPE usage as a potential nonconformity, supported by specific evidence collected from observation and initial inquiries, and discuss this with the Auditor representative. Option C. Immediately halt the use of the chemical substance until a full risk assessment is completed by the organization, citing the potential for immediate danger. Option D. Suggest to the production supervisor that a risk assessment be conducted promptly and provide guidance on the necessary steps for a compliant assessment. The correct answer is B. Document the observed lack of risk assessment and incorrect PPE usage as a potential nonconformity, supported by specific evidence collected from observation and initial inquiries, and discuss this with the Auditor representative. Explanation. The auditor's primary responsibility is to provide objective evidence to support their findings regarding the conformity of the organization's OH&S management system with ISO 45001-2018 requirements and applicable legal and other requirements. When an auditor identifies a potential nonconformity during an audit, such as a missing risk assessment for a newly introduced chemical, the immediate action is to gather sufficient, appropriate evidence to substantiate this observation. This evidence could include observing the process, reviewing documentation or lack thereof, and interviewing relevant personnel. The auditor must then document this evidence clearly and precisely. The purpose of this evidence is to form the basis of a nonconformity report, which is then discussed with the auditee to verify its accuracy and completeness. The goal is to ensure that the finding is fact-based and actionable, allowing the organization to implement effective corrective actions. The auditor's role is to facilitate this process by presenting factual findings derived from systematic examination, not to provide solutions or dictate specific corrective actions at this initial stage. Question 6. An auditor, MS, Anya Sharma is conducting an ISO 45001 audit at Innovate Tech Solutions. During a site visit, she inadvertently accesses confidential documents detailing a novel hazard control technology that Innovate Tech Solutions has been developing, which has significant competitive implications for other companies in the industry, including her own employer. Ms. Sharma believes this information could provide her company with a substantial advantage. Which audit principle is most directly challenged by her contemplation of sharing this information with her employer? Option A, evidence-based approach. Option B, independence. Option C, due professional care. Option D, confidentiality. Correct answer is D, confidentiality. Explanation: the auditor's responsibility to maintain confidentiality, as outlined in the ISO 20000 audit principles, dictates that sensitive information obtained during the audit process must not be disclosed to unauthorized parties. This principle is crucial for fostering trust and ensuring the integrity of the audit. In the given scenario, the auditor, Ms. Anya Sharma, received proprietary information about a competitor's new safety technology during an audit of Innovate Tech Solutions. Disclosing this information to her own company, which is a direct competitor, would be a clear violation of confidentiality. This action would undermine the trust placed in auditors and could lead to unfair competitive advantages, directly contravening the ethical standards expected of an ISO 45001 auditor. The principle of independence also plays a role here, as her actions would suggest a lack of impartiality and a potential conflict of interest. Due professional care requires acting diligently and thoroughly, which includes safeguarding client information. The evidence-based approach focuses on factual findings, not on leveraging confidential information gained through the audit for personal or organizational gain. Question 7. An auditor is reviewing the documented information control processes at a large manufacturing facility. They observe that while the facility has a comprehensive system for creating and updating safety procedures, the mechanisms for ensuring the protection and accessibility of older versions of these procedures, particularly those relevant for legal or incident investigation purposes, appear less robust. Which aspect of documented information control, as per ISO 45001, 2018, is most likely to be deficient in this scenario? Option A, establishing and maintaining documented information in an appropriate format and medium. Option B, ensuring documented information is identified and legible. Option C, ensuring documented information is protected, including prevention of unauthorized access or misuse, and preservation of integrity. Option D, maintaining documented information for use where it is needed and is readily available. The correct answer is C, ensuring documented information is protected, including prevention of unauthorized access or misuse and preservation of integrity. Explanation: the core of controlling documented information in an ISO 45001-2018 system revolves around ensuring its availability, suitability for use, and protection. Clause 7.5.3, Control of Documented Information, outlines the requirements for this. When auditing, an auditor must verify that an organization has established processes to identify, store, protect, retrieve, use, and retain documented information. This includes measures to prevent deterioration or loss, and to ensure legibility and easy identification. Furthermore, it mandates controls for its distribution, access, retrieval, and use. The concept of appropriate controls is broad and encompasses measures like version control, access restrictions, backup procedures, and clear retention and disposal policies. These controls are fundamental to maintaining the integrity and effectiveness of the OH&S management system. The specific methods chosen by an organization to implement these controls, such as a digital document management system with audit trails or a well-defined physical filing system with security measures, are subject to auditor evaluation based on their effectiveness in meeting the standards requirements. The auditor's role is to confirm that these controls are in place and functioning, as intended to manage documented information throughout its lifecycle. Question 8. An auditor is evaluating the effectiveness of an organization's OH&S management system concerning worker consultation and participation, as mandated by ISO 45001, 2018 Clause 6.4. The organization has implemented a suggestion box system for OH&S improvements and holds monthly safety committee meetings where management presents OH&S performance data. during the audit. It is noted that while workers are encouraged to submit suggestions, there is no formal process for acknowledging receipt or providing feedback on the feasibility or implementation status of these suggestions. Furthermore, the Safety Committee meetings primarily focus on reviewing incident statistics and proposed management actions, with limited opportunity for workers to proactively identify emerging risks or propose alternative control measures beyond those already considered by management. Which of the following observations would indicate the most significant deficiency in meeting the spirit and intent of ISO 45001-2018 regarding consultation and participation? Option A: the scheduling of Safety Committee meetings on a monthly basis, which may not be frequent enough for timely OH&S issue resolution. Option B: the presentation of OH&S performance data to workers during Safety Committee meetings, without a formal mechanism for workers to verify the accuracy of the data. Option C: the absence of a documented procedure for acknowledging and responding to worker OH&S suggestions, coupled with limited worker influence in shaping the agenda and discussion points of Safety Committee meetings. Option D: the reliance on a suggestion box for OH&S feedback, without providing workers with access to detailed incident investigation reports. The correct answer is C: the absence of a documented procedure for acknowledging and responding to worker OH&S suggestions, coupled with limited worker influence in shaping the agenda and discussion points of Safety Committee meetings. Explanation: the core principle of ISO 45001-2018 concerning consultation and participation of workers is to ensure that workers at all levels, and their representatives where they exist, are involved in the development, planning, implementation, performance evaluation, and improvement of the OH&S management system. This involvement is not merely about informing workers. It requires active engagement and the provision of opportunities for them to contribute their knowledge and perspectives. Clause 6.4 specifically details the requirements for consultation and participation. An auditor must verify that the organization has established, implemented, and maintained processes for consultation and participation that are effective in identifying OH&S hazards and risks, developing controls, and fostering a positive OH&S culture. This includes ensuring that information relevant to OH&S is provided to workers in an understandable format, and that they have the opportunity to raise concerns, suggest improvements, and participate in decision-making processes related to OH&S. The effectiveness of these processes is crucial for the overall success of the OH&S management system, as it leverages the direct experience and insights of those most exposed to workplace hazards. Therefore, an auditor would look for evidence of mechanisms that facilitate this two-way communication and influence, going beyond mere information dissemination. Question 9. When auditing an organization's OSMs for compliance with ISO 45001-2018, an auditor observes that the documented procedure for hazard identification and risk assessment is robust and aligns with Clause 8.1. 2. However, the organization's strategic objectives do not explicitly mention improving worker well-being or reducing OHS-related incidents. Which aspect of the OSMs is most likely not adequately integrated, potentially leading to a nonconformity related to the overall intent of the standard? Option A: the lack of specific performance indicators related to OHS in the organization's operational control procedures, contrary to Clause 8.1. 2. Option B: the organization's failure to integrate OHS considerations into its strategic planning and decision-making processes, as required by Clause 4.1 and Clause 5.4. Option C: the insufficient involvement of workers in the development of the OSMs, which is a fundamental requirement of Clause 5.4. Option D: the absence of a formal process for reviewing the effectiveness of the hazard identification and risk assessment procedure, as stipulated in Clause 9.3. Correct answer is B: the organization's failure to integrate OHS considerations into its strategic planning and decision-making processes, as required by Clause 4.1 and Clause 5.4. Explanation: the core of an effective occupational health and safety management system, OSMs, audit under ISO 45001-2018 lies in verifying that the organization's processes are designed to achieve their intended outcomes and that these outcomes align with the standard's requirements. Clause 4.1. Understanding the organization and its context is foundational. It mandates that the organization must determine external and internal issues relevant to its purpose and its strategic direction that affect its ability to achieve the intended outcome, S, of its OSMs. This includes understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties concerning OHS. Clause 6. 1. General further emphasizes that the organization shall establish, implement, and maintain processes to determine opportunities and requirements for OHS risks and other risks. Therefore, an auditor must assess how the organization has systematically identified and analyzed these contextual factors and interested party requirements to inform the development and continual improvement of its OSMs. This proactive approach, linking context and stakeholder needs to OHS performance, is a critical indicator of a mature and compliant system. The identification of opportunities for improvement is also a key output of this process, ensuring the system evolves beyond mere compliance. Question 10. During an audit of a manufacturing firm's occupational health and safety management system, the auditor reviews documentation and conducts interviews. The firm operates in a country with stringent worker protection laws and is experiencing increased demand due to global supply chain shifts. Internally, the company has recently invested in advanced automation technology and is implementing a new performance appraisal system that includes safety metrics. The auditor also notes the company's commitment to a zero-incident safety culture. Considering the requirements of ISO 45001-2018, regarding understanding the organization and its context, which of the following represents an issue that is least relevant to the organization's OSM's context, as defined by the standard, particularly when considering the defined scope of the OSMs? Option A. The organization's strategic decision to implement a new enterprise resource planning (ERP) system. Option B. The effectiveness of the organization's internal communication protocols for safety alerts. Option C. The impact of newly enacted national regulations on hazardous material handling. Option D. The influence of evolving global market demand on production schedules and potential overtime. The correct answer is A. The organization's strategic decision to implement a new enterprise resource planning (ERP) system. Explanation. The organization's context, as defined by ISO 45001-2018, requires understanding both internal and external issues that can affect its ability to achieve its intended outcomes for the Occupational Health and Safety Management System, OSMs. External issues encompass factors originating outside the organization, such as legal and regulatory requirements, technological advancements, market conditions, and societal expectations. Internal issues are those that arise from within the organization, including its culture, policies, objectives, resources, and the capabilities of its workforce. Clause 4. 1. Understanding the organization and its context mandates that organizations determine external and internal issues relevant to their purpose and their strategic direction, and that these issues affect their ability to achieve the intended results of their OSMs. An auditor must be able to discern which identified issues are truly external to the organization's direct control and influence, and which are internal factors that the organization manages. For instance, a new national safety standard is an external issue because it is imposed by a governmental body. Conversely, the effectiveness of the organization's internal communication channels regarding safety procedures is an internal issue. The scope of the OSMs is also a critical consideration. It defines the boundaries within which the OSMs is applied. Therefore, identifying issues that fall outside the defined scope, even if they are organizational matters, means they are not directly addressed by the current OSMs audit. The question asks for an issue that is not relevant to the organization's context as per the standard. A company's decision to adopt a new enterprise resource planning (ERP) system, while an internal matter that could indirectly impact OSM's operations through process changes or resource allocation, is not inherently an occupational health and safety issue in itself. It is a business process improvement initiative. While its implementation might create new OHS risks that need to be managed, the ERP system adoption itself is a strategic business decision rather than a direct contextual factor for OSMs. Question 11. During an audit of a manufacturing facility that utilizes various chemical solvents and operates within a jurisdiction that has recently updated its regulations on volatile organic compounds, VOC, and hazardous waste disposal, what is the most critical aspect in ISO 2018 auditor must verify regarding the organization's determination of legal and other requirements. Option A. Existence and effectiveness of a systematic process to identify, access, and update all applicable national, regional, and local OHS legislation, industry standards, and voluntary commitments, with specific evidence of how the recent VOC and hazardous waste regulation changes were incorporated into the OH&S management system. Option B. The organization's historical compliance record with previously identified legal requirements, irrespective of any new or revised regulations. Option C. The organization's internal training records demonstrating that all employees have been made aware of the general principles of occupational health and safety legislation relevant to their roles. Option D. The number of external consultants engaged by the organization to interpret and advise on environmental and OHS legal obligations. The correct answer is A. The existence and effectiveness of a systematic process to identify, access, and update all applicable national, regional, and local OHS legislation, industry standards, and voluntary commitments, with specific evidence of how the recent VOC and hazardous waste regulation changes were incorporated into the OH&S management system. Explanation. The process of determining legal and other requirements for an ISO 45001-2018 management system involves a systematic approach to identify all applicable obligations. This begins with understanding the organization's context, including its activities, products, and services. Auditors must verify that the organization has a documented procedure for identifying, accessing, and keeping up to date its legal and other requirements. This involves consulting various sources such as national and local legislation concerning occupational health and safety, e.g., workplace safety acts, hazardous substances regulations, specific industry standards mandated by government bodies, international conventions if applicable, and any other requirements the organization has committed to, such as industry codes of practice, voluntary standards, or agreements with stakeholders. The key is to ensure these requirements are integrated into the OH&S management system, and that the organization is aware of how they apply to its operations. For instance, an auditor would check if the organization has a mechanism to monitor changes in legislation, such as subscribing to regulatory update services or engaging with legal counsel. The effectiveness of this process is demonstrated by the organization's ability to comply with these identified requirements and to use them as a basis for setting OH&S objectives and targets. The auditor's role is to confirm that this determination is comprehensive, current, and that the organization has the means to implement and maintain compliance. Question 12. When auditing an organization's OH&S management system for conformity with ISO 45001-2018 and specifically reviewing the process for understanding the organization and its context, Clause 4. 1. What critical element must an auditor prioritize to ensure the system is effectively tailored to the organization's unique operational environment and OH&S risks? Option A. Confirming the organization has a comprehensive list of all potential interested parties, regardless of their relevance to OH&S. Option B. Assessing the frequency of management reviews without directly linking them to the understanding of organizational context. Option C. Verifying that the identified internal and external issues directly inform the OH&S policy, objectives, and the determination of OH&S risks and opportunities. Option D. Ensuring the organization has documented all possible legal and regulatory requirements, even those not applicable to their specific operations. The correct answer is C. Verifying that the identified internal and external issues directly inform the OH&S policy, objectives, and the determination of OH&S risks and opportunities. Explanation. Understanding the organization and its context, as defined in Clause 4. 1 of ISO 45001-2018 is fundamental for establishing, implementing, maintaining, and continually improving an occupational health and safety (O&S) management system. This clause requires an organization to determine external and internal issues that are relevant to its purpose and its strategic direction, and that affect its ability to achieve the intended outcome of its OH&S management system. It also requires determining the needs and expectations of interested parties and the relevant requirements of interested parties. For an auditor, This means assessing how effectively the organization has identified and considered these factors when defining its OH&S policy, objectives, and processes. The auditor must verify that the organization's understanding of its context informs its risk and opportunity assessment and the development of its OH&S management system. For instance, an organization operating in a highly regulated industry with a history of serious incidents would need to demonstrate a deeper consideration of external legal and regulatory requirements and the expectations of regulatory bodies as interested parties, compared to a less regulated organization. The auditor would look for evidence that these contextual factors have been systematically analyzed and integrated into the OH&S management system's design and operation, influencing the scope, hazard identification, and control measures. The effectiveness of the OH&S management system is directly linked to how well it is tailored to the organization's unique circumstances, including its operational environment, culture, and the specific OH&S risks and opportunities it faces. Question 13. During the closing meeting of an ISO 45001/2018 audit at a manufacturing facility, the lead auditor presents a nonconformity related to the inadequate implementation of the process for hazard identification and risk assessment for new machinery, citing specific observations and evidence. The auditee's representative strongly disagrees, asserting that their internal procedures are sufficient and the auditor has misunderstood their operational context, but provides no new objective evidence to counter the auditor's observations. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the lead auditor? Option A. Immediately concede the point and remove the nonconformity from the audit report to maintain a positive relationship with the auditee. Option B. Postpone the closing meeting indefinitely until the auditee can gather additional documentation to satisfy the auditor's concerns. Option C. Engage in a lengthy debate with the auditee to try and convince them of the validity of the nonconformity based on the auditor's interpretation of the standard. Option D. Reiterate the objective evidence that supports the nonconformity and explain the process for formal appeal of audit findings if the auditee continues to disagree. Correct answer is D. Reiterate the objective evidence that supports the nonconformity and explain the process for formal appeal of audit findings if the auditee continues to disagree. Explanation. The closing meeting of an ISO 45001 audit is a critical forum for communicating findings and ensuring understanding. According to ISO 45001-2018, Clause 9, 2, Internal Audit, and ISO 19011-2018 Guidelines for Auditing Management Systems, the audit team leader is responsible for conducting this meeting. The primary purpose is to present the audit findings, including any nonconformities and opportunities for improvement, and to discuss the overall conclusion of the audit. It is also an opportunity for the auditee to seek clarification. The meeting should summarize the audit scope, objectives, and methodology, present the key findings and their implications for the OSMs, and outline the next steps, such as the issuance of the audit report and the expected timeline for corrective actions. Importantly, the closing meeting is not a forum for negotiating findings or assigning blame. It is a formal communication of factual observations. Therefore, the most appropriate action for an auditor to take when confronted with an auditee's persistent disagreement on a factual finding during the closing meeting is to reiterate the evidence supporting the finding and explain that the finding is based on objective evidence gathered during the audit. The auditor should also inform the auditee of the process for formally appealing findings if they believe the evidence has been misinterpreted, which typically involves the report submission and subsequent review. The auditor's role is to report findings based on the audit criteria, not to resolve disputes in real time that require further investigation or formal appeal. Question 14. During an audit of a manufacturing facility that utilizes external contractors for specialized welding operations on critical structural components, what specific evidence would an ISO 45001-2018 auditor most critically seek to verify compliance with Clause 8? 1. 4. Purchasing, concerning contractor management. Option A. A general statement in the procurement policy indicating that OH&S is a consideration, without specific documented procedures for contractor evaluation or monitoring. Option B. Records demonstrating the contractor's OH&S competency assessment, communication of the organization's OH&S requirements to the contractor, and evidence of monitoring the contractor's on-site welding activities for compliance with established safety procedures. Option C. The contractor's annual financial statements to ensure their economic stability and ability to complete the contracted work safely. Option D. The contractor's insurance certificates, confirming they possess the minimum liability coverage as stipulated by local regulations, irrespective of their OH&S management system. The correct answer is B. Records demonstrating the contractor's OH&S competency assessment, communication of the organization's OH&S requirements to the contractor, and evidence of monitoring the contractor's on-site welding activities for compliance with established safety procedures. Explanation: ISO 45001-2018 Clause 8. 1. 4. Purchasing mandates that an organization shall establish, implement, and maintain a process to ensure that outsourced processes, products, and services conform to the requirements of the OH&S management system. This extends to ensuring that OH&S requirements are considered when procuring goods and services. For contractors, this means that their OH&S performance and capabilities should be evaluated before engagement, and their activities on-site must be monitored and controlled. The organization must also communicate its OH&S requirements to contractors and ensure they understand and comply with them. When auditing a procurement process involving a specialized contractor for high-risk activities, an auditor would look for evidence that the organization has integrated OH&S considerations into the entire procurement lifecycle, from supplier selection and evaluation to contract management and ongoing performance monitoring. This includes verifying that the contractor's OH&S policies, procedures, and competence are assessed, that contractual clauses address OH&S obligations, and that mechanisms exist to monitor the contractor's on-site activities and address any nonconformities. The absence of documented OH&S risk assessments for contractor activities or a lack of communication of specific OH&S requirements to the contractor would indicate a gap in fulfilling the requirements of Clause 8. 1. 4. The organization's OH&S policy and objectives must also be considered to ensure alignment. Question 15. During an audit of a manufacturing facility, an auditor is examining the records of the most recent management review meeting for the OH&S management system. The meeting minutes indicate a thorough discussion of recent workplace accident statistics, changes in relevant safety legislation, and feedback received from a limited number of department supervisors. However, the minutes do not explicitly mention any review of worker consultation activities or the outcomes of corrective actions implemented from previous internal audits. Considering the requirements of ISO 45001-2018, what would be the most significant concern for the auditor regarding the adequacy of this management review? Option A. The lack of a formal agenda distributed to all attendees prior to the meeting. Option B. The limited scope of feedback, excluding input from frontline operational staff. Option C. The focus on accident statistics without considering near-miss reporting trends. Option D. The omission of documented evidence on worker consultation and the effectiveness of previous corrective actions. The correct answer is D. The omission of documented evidence on worker consultation and the effectiveness of previous corrective actions. Explanation: the management review is a critical process within an occupational health and safety OHS management system, as mandated by ISO 45001-2018 Clause 9. 3. This clause requires top management to review the organization's OH&S management system at planned intervals to ensure its continuing suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness. The inputs to the management review are crucial for ensuring that the review is comprehensive and leads to actionable outcomes. Clause 9.3 specifies these inputs, which include changes in external and internal issues relevant to the OH&S management system, information on the performance and effectiveness of the OH&S management system, including trends in incident rates, occupational ill health, and other nonconformities and corrective actions, feedback from interested parties, results of consultation and participation of workers, and outcomes of previous management reviews. It also includes information on opportunities for improvement and the need for changes to the OH&S management system, including any opportunities for improving the prevention of injury and ill health. The outputs of the management review, as per Clause 9.3, must include decisions related to opportunities for improvement and any need for changes to the OH&S management system, including the need for resources. Therefore, an auditor assessing the management review process would look for evidence that all these specified inputs have been considered. The absence of information regarding the consultation and participation of workers, or the outcomes of previous reviews, would represent a significant gap in the management review process, potentially leading to nonconformities. Question 16. When evaluating the competence of an individual designated to conduct audits of an organization's occupational health and safety management system, which of the following represents the most fundamental and overarching requirement according to the principles of ISO 45001-2018 and associated auditing guidance? Option A. The auditor's prior experience in a direct occupational health and safety role within an industry similar to the one being audited. Option B. The auditor's possession of a formal certification from a globally recognized auditing certification body for OH&S management systems. Option C. The auditor's successful completion of a minimum number of continuing professional development (CPD) hours specifically focused on OH&S legislation in the audited organization's jurisdiction. Option D. The auditor's demonstrated ability to plan, execute, and report on OH&S management system audits, including the application of auditing principles and techniques. The correct answer is D. The auditor's demonstrated ability to plan, execute, and report on OH&S management system audits, including the application of auditing principles and techniques. Explanation. The core principle of ensuring auditor competence under ISO 45001-2018, particularly for an auditor, revolves around demonstrating the necessary knowledge, skills, and experience to perform audits effectively. This includes understanding the ISO 45001 standard itself, auditing principles and techniques, as outlined in ISO 19011, and the specific context of the organization being audited, including its relevant legal and other requirements. While obtaining a certification, like from a recognized body, is a common way to demonstrate competence, it is not the sole or exclusive method. The standard emphasizes the need for auditors to possess the capability to plan, conduct, and report on OH&S management system audits, identify nonconformities, and contribute to the improvement of the organization's OH&S performance. Therefore, the most encompassing and fundamental aspect is the demonstrable ability to perform the audit tasks, irrespective of the specific pathway taken to acquire that ability. This capability is assessed through a combination of education, training, work experience, and ongoing professional development. The ability to apply knowledge and skills in real-world audit situations is paramount. Question 17. During an audit of a manufacturing facility in the United Kingdom, an auditor is reviewing the organization's process for ensuring compliance with health and safety legislation. The organization has provided a comprehensive register of applicable laws and regulations, including the Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act 1974, and specific regulations pertaining to machinery safety and manual handling. The auditor finds that the organization has a procedure for reviewing legal updates, but the last review date documented for a specific piece of legislation concerning noise exposure limits was 18 months prior to the audit. The organization's internal audit report from 6 months ago noted this as a minor nonconformity, with a planned action to review legislation quarterly. However, no evidence of this quarterly review has been implemented or documented since that internal audit. What is the most appropriate auditor conclusion regarding the evaluation of compliance with legal and other requirements in this scenario? Option A. The organization's system for monitoring and updating legal requirements is not effectively implemented, indicating a potential systemic failure in maintaining compliance. Option B. The auditor should focus solely on the last documented review, as the internal audit finding does not constitute a current noncompliance. Option C. The auditor should accept the organization's self-declaration of compliance, as the primary legislation is listed in their register. Option D. The organization has demonstrated a commitment to compliance by maintaining a register of legislation, and the infrequent review is a minor procedural oversight. The correct answer is A. The organization's system for monitoring and updating legal requirements is not effectively implemented, indicating a potential systemic failure in maintaining compliance. Explanation. The core of evaluating compliance with ISO 45001-2018, particularly concerning legal and other requirements, involves a systematic process. An auditor must first identify all applicable legal and other requirements relevant to the organization's context, hazards, and risks. This identification is typically documented by the organization. The auditor's role is then to verify the effectiveness of the organization's system for identifying, accessing, and understanding these requirements. This includes checking if the organization has a process to stay updated on changes to legislation, such as amendments to the control of substances hazardous to health (COSH), regulations, or updates to local environmental permits. The auditor then assesses how the organization integrates these requirements into its OH&S management system. This involves examining documented procedures, work instructions, and training materials to ensure they reflect legal obligations. For instance, if a new regulation mandates specific types of respiratory protection for certain tasks, the auditor would look for evidence that this has been incorporated into risk assessments, safe work procedures, and the selection of appropriate personal protective equipment, PPE. Furthermore, the auditor verifies the organization's methods for monitoring and measuring its compliance status. This might include reviewing internal audit reports, management review minutes where compliance is discussed, or specific compliance checklists. The auditor also needs to assess the effectiveness of corrective actions taken when non-compliance is identified. A critical aspect is understanding how the organization determines its compliance status, which often involves a combination of self-assessments, internal audits, and potentially external reviews. The auditor's objective is not just to find instances of non-compliance, but to evaluate the robustness of the system designed to ensure and maintain compliance over time, considering the dynamic nature of legal frameworks and organizational operation. Question 18. When evaluating an organization's internal audit program for its occupational health and safety management system, what is the primary basis for determining the frequency and methods of conducting these audits, as per ISO 45001-2018 requirements? Option A. The results of previous audits, changes affecting the organization, and the performance of the OHS management system. Option B. A fixed annual schedule mandated by top management to ensure consistent oversight. Option C. Compliance with national occupational safety and health legislation, irrespective of the OHS management system's performance. Option D. The availability of internal audit resources and the perceived complexity of specific operational areas. The correct answer is A. The results of previous audits, changes affecting the organization, and the performance of the OHS management system. Explanation: ISO 45001-2018 Clause 9. 2. 2 outlines the requirements for establishing, implementing, and maintaining an audit program. This clause mandates that the organization shall conduct internal audits at planned intervals to provide information about whether the OHS management system conforms to the organization's own requirements for the OHS management system and the requirements of ISO 45001, and whether it is effectively implemented and maintained. The frequency and methods for conducting these audits are to be determined based on factors such as the results of previous audits, changes in the organization's OHS risks and opportunities, and the performance of the OHS management system. Specifically, the organization must consider the importance of the processes concerned, changes affecting the organization, and results of previous audits. An auditor's role is to assess the adequacy of this audit program planning, ensuring that the chosen frequencies and methods are justified by these considerations, and that the audit program covers all aspects of the OHS management system over a reasonable period. The auditor must verify that the selection of auditors is competent, and that the audit process itself is objective and impartial. The organization is responsible for defining the criteria and scope for each audit, and the audit program must address the competence of auditors and ensure the objectivity and impartiality of the audit process. The frequency should not be a fixed calendar schedule, but a dynamic determination based on risk and performance. Question 19. During an audit of a manufacturing facility, an auditor is reviewing the organization's approach to worker participation in the OH&S management system. The facility has a diverse workforce with varying levels of literacy and language proficiency. The organization has posted OH&S notices on a central bulletin board and conducted a single, mandatory all-hands meeting 6 months prior to the audit to solicit feedback. The auditor notes that while these activities occurred, there is limited evidence of ongoing, meaningful engagement from a significant portion of the workforce, particularly those in production roles who may not have regular access to the bulletin board or the ability to attend all-hands meetings due to shift work. Considering the intent of ISO 45001-2018, which of the following actions by the auditor would best demonstrate a thorough evaluation of the organization's compliance with the requirements for worker consultation and participation? Option A. Requesting evidence of multiple, varied communication channels used to solicit and incorporate worker feedback on OH&S matters, ensuring these channels are accessible and understandable to all workers, including those with different literacy levels or on different shifts. Option B. Confirming that a designated OH&S committee exists and that minutes from their meetings are available, regardless of the committee's composition or the extent of their engagement with the broader workforce. Option C. Examining the number of OH&S suggestions submitted by workers through the company's suggestion box over the past year and comparing this to industry benchmarks without assessing the organization's responsiveness to these suggestions. Option D. Verifying that the organization has a documented policy on worker participation and that all workers have signed an acknowledgement of this policy during their onboarding process. Correct answer is A. Requesting evidence of multiple varied communication channels used to solicit and incorporate worker feedback on OH&S matters, ensuring these channels are accessible and understandable to all workers, including those with different literacy levels or on different shifts. Explanation: ISO 45001-2018 Clause 5. 4. Consultation and participation of workers in Clause 5. 4. 1. General. Mandate that the organization shall establish, implement, and maintain one or more processes for consultation and participation of workers at all applicable levels and functions, and where they exist, workers' representatives. This consultation and participation is critical for establishing, implementing, maintaining, and improving the OH&S management system. Specifically, the standard requires that the organization shall ensure that relevant workers and their representatives, where they exist, are consulted on OH&S matters on a timely basis. This includes seeking their views and participation in decision-making processes concerning the OH&S management system. For an auditor, verifying the effectiveness of these processes involves examining how the organization identifies OH&S risks and opportunities, determines control measures, and sets OH&S objectives. The consultation process should be documented and demonstrate genuine engagement, not merely a perfunctory notification. The auditor would look for evidence of worker input influencing the development and review of policies, procedures, and risk assessments, as well as their involvement in incident investigations and the corrective action process. The auditor must ensure that the organization has a mechanism to receive feedback, address concerns, and incorporate worker knowledge into the OH&S system's continuous improvement. Question 20. During an audit of a manufacturing facility, an auditor observes a worker in a designated high-noise area not wearing the mandated hearing protection. The organization's OHS policy clearly states that hearing protection is mandatory in all areas exceeding 85 decibels. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the auditor to take to gather sufficient appropriate audit evidence regarding this potential nonconformity? Option A. Focus solely on interviewing the worker to understand their personal reasoning for not wearing the hearing protection, without verifying the policy or area conditions. Option B. Interview the worker to understand why they are not wearing the hearing protection, review the documented procedure for hearing protection requirements in that area, and observe the specific conditions of the area to confirm the noise hazard. Option C. Immediately issue a nonconformity report based on the observation, assuming the worker is in violation of the policy. Option D. Note the observation in the audit working papers and plan to discuss it with the worker's supervisor at a later stage without direct immediate engagement. Correct answer is B. Interview the worker to understand why they are not wearing the hearing protection, review the documented procedure for hearing protection requirements in that area, and observe the specific conditions of the area to confirm the noise hazard. Explanation: the core principle being tested here is the auditor's responsibility to gather sufficient appropriate audit evidence to support their findings and conclusions. ISO 45001-2018 Clause 9. 2. Internal audit and Annex A. 5. General criteria for the competence of auditors emphasize the need for auditors to be objective and impartial and to base their conclusions on evidence. When an auditor observes a potential nonconformity during an audit, such as an employee not wearing required personal protective equipment, PPE, in a designated hazardous area. The auditor must gather evidence to confirm this observation and understand its context. This involves more than just seeing the act. It requires understanding the organization's established procedures, the employee's awareness of these procedures, and any contributing factors. Interviewing the employee to understand their actions, reviewing the relevant documented procedure for PPE requirements, and observing the specific area's hazard classification are all crucial steps in obtaining sufficient appropriate audit evidence. This evidence will allow the auditor to determine if a nonconformity exists against the requirements of the OSMs and potentially against relevant legal requirements, e.g., workplace safety regulations mandating PPE. Simply noting the observation without further investigation would not constitute a robust audit finding. The auditor's role is to verify conformity, and this verification requires a systematic evidence-gathering process. The other options represent incomplete or less effective approaches to evidence gathering in this scenario, focusing solely on the employee's intent or the availability of PPE, without verifying the procedure or the hazard context, would lead to an incomplete or potentially inaccurate audit conclusion. Question 21. When developing an audit program for a multinational manufacturing organization with diverse operational sites and varying local regulatory requirements, what is the most critical factor an ISO 45001-2018 auditor must consider when determining the frequency and methods for conducting internal audits across these different locations? Option A. Significance of risks and opportunities associated with the processes at each specific site, alongside the demonstrated effectiveness of existing OHS controls and compliance with applicable legal and other requirements relevant to that site. Option B. The availability of internal audit resources, prioritizing sites with larger employee populations regardless of their specific OHS performance or risk profile. Option C. The personal preference of site management regarding the timing and scope of internal audits to foster a collaborative audit environment. Option D. The chronological order of previous audit findings, ensuring that sites with older unresolved nonconformities are audited more frequently to expedite their closure. Correct answer is A. The significance of risks and opportunities associated with the processes at each specific site, alongside the demonstrated effectiveness of existing OHS controls and compliance with applicable legal and other requirements relevant to that site. Explanation. The core principle behind establishing an effective audit program for an occupational health and safety management system, as guided by ISO 45001-2018, is to ensure that audits are conducted in a systematic, independent, and documented manner to provide information about the conformity and effectiveness of the OHS management system. Clause 8.2 of ISO 45001-2018 outlines the requirements for establishing, implementing, and maintaining an audit program. This program must consider the importance of the processes concerned, changes affecting the organization, and the results of previous audits. When determining the frequency and methods for conducting internal audits, an auditor must assess various factors. These factors include the significance of identified risks and opportunities associated with specific operational areas, the maturity and effectiveness of existing OHS controls in those areas, and the need to verify compliance with legal and other requirements that may be specific to certain processes or locations. The program should also reflect the organization's operational context and the dynamic nature of OHS risks. Therefore, an audit program's design should be a strategic undertaking that prioritizes audit activities based on a comprehensive understanding of the organization's OHS performance, risk profile, and compliance obligations, rather than solely on arbitrary timeframes or the availability of auditors. The program's robustness is directly linked to its ability to provide assurance on the system's ongoing suitability and effectiveness. Question 22. When initiating an ISO 45001-2018 audit at a manufacturing facility that has recently implemented new hazardous material handling procedures, what critical element should the lead auditor prioritize discussing and confirming during the opening meeting to ensure effective audit planning and execution? Option A. The availability of all historical safety data from the previous year to establish a baseline for performance comparison. Option B. The company's financial reports to assess the resource allocation for the Occupational Health and Safety Management System. Option C. The detailed organizational chart of the company, including the reporting lines for all employees involved in safety management. Option D. The specific clauses of ISO 45001-2018 directly related to the new hazardous material handling procedures and the agreed-upon audit scope, including any specific operational areas or processes to be examined. Correct answer is D. The specific clauses of ISO 45001-2018 directly related to the new hazardous material handling procedures and the agreed-upon audit scope, including any specific operational areas or processes to be examined. Explanation. The opening meeting for an ISO 45001 audit serves as the formal commencement of the audit process. Its primary purpose is to establish clear communication channels, confirm the audit scope and objectives, and ensure all necessary arrangements are in place. Key elements to be discussed and agreed upon include the audit plan, the availability of personnel and documentation, the audit criteria, and the reporting of findings. It is crucial for the auditor to explain the audit methodology, including how evidence will be gathered and how conclusions will be reached. The meeting also provides an opportunity for the auditee to raise any concerns or clarify expectations. The auditor must ensure that the opening meeting sets a collaborative and transparent tone for the entire audit, facilitating effective information exchange and fostering confidence in the audit process. This aligns with the principles of ISO 19011, Guidelines for Auditing Management Systems, which emphasizes planning, conducting, and reporting audits effectively. The auditor's role is to guide this meeting to achieve its objectives, ensuring alignment with the ISO 45001 standards requirements for planning and conducting audits. Question 23. An auditor is reviewing the OH&S management system of a manufacturing company that produces specialized electronic components. The company has a diverse workforce, including assembly line workers, engineers, maintenance staff, and administrative personnel. During the audit, the auditor finds that the company primarily relies on annual employee surveys to gather feedback on OH&S concerns. However, the auditor also discovers that several recent incidents involving ergonomic strain among assembly line workers were not adequately addressed in the company's OH&S action plans until after a formal complaint was filed with the local labor inspectorate. The company's management states they are committed to worker well-being. Which of the following approaches best demonstrates the organization's systematic determination of workers' needs and expectations for OH&S, aligning with ISO 45001-2018 requirements, considering the auditor's findings? Option A. Conducting a comprehensive, one-time risk assessment of all job roles at the commencement of the OH&S management system, assuming all worker needs are captured at that point. Option B. Establishing multiple, varied, and ongoing channels for workers to communicate OH&S concerns, such as regular toolbox talks, anonymous reporting systems, and direct engagement during safety committee meetings, and actively demonstrating how this feedback informs risk assessments and control measures. Option C. Relying solely on the mandatory annual employee satisfaction survey, assuming it adequately captures all potential OH&S needs and expectations from all worker groups. Option D. Documenting all OH&S requirements solely based on legal and regulatory compliance, without actively seeking or integrating feedback from workers or other relevant interested parties. The correct answer is B. Establishing multiple, varied, and ongoing channels for workers to communicate OH&S concerns, such as regular toolbox talks, anonymous reporting systems, and direct engagement during safety committee meetings, and actively demonstrating how this feedback informs risk assessments and control measures. Explanation. The determination of the needs and expectations of workers and other interested parties under ISO 45001-2018 is a foundational step for establishing and maintaining an effective occupational health and safety (O&S) management system. Clause 4. 2 of the standard specifically addresses this requirement. It mandates that the organization shall determine A. the interested parties that are relevant to the OH&S management system, and B. the requirements of these interested parties that are relevant to the OH&S management system. Workers are explicitly identified as a primary interested party, and their needs and expectations must be considered. This process is not a one-time activity, but an ongoing one, requiring the organization to monitor and review information from these parties. The effectiveness of the OH&S system is directly linked to how well it addresses these identified needs and expectations. For instance, if workers express concerns about specific chemical exposures through a suggestion box, the organization must investigate and incorporate relevant actions into its OH&S system, which might involve updated risk assessments, new control measures, or enhanced training. Similarly, regulatory bodies, other interested parties, have legal requirements that the organization must comply with, which are also considered requirements of interested parties. The auditor's role is to verify that this determination process is systematic, comprehensive, and that the identified needs and expectations are integrated into the OH&S management system's planning, operation, and improvement activities. This includes reviewing documented procedures for consultation and participation, records of feedback from workers and other stakeholders, and evidence of how this input has influenced OH&S objectives and controls. Question 24. When conducting an audit of a manufacturing facility that produces specialized chemical compounds, an auditor is reviewing the process for identifying potential sources of harm. The facility's OHS policy emphasizes proactive hazard identification, considering the precise definitions provided within ISO 45001/2018 for occupational health and safety management systems. Which of the following best encapsulates the fundamental concept of a hazard in this context? Option A. The effect of uncertainty on objectives, specifically the likelihood of an occurrence and the severity of the resulting injury or ill health. Option B. A source of or situation with the potential to cause harm, injury, occupational illness, damage to property, damage to the work environment, or a combination of these. Option C. A physical or environmental factor that creates a possibility for harm, injury, or ill health to manifest. Option D. An incident where no injury or ill health occurred, but circumstances indicated a potential for such an outcome. The correct answer is B. A source of or situation with the potential to cause harm, injury, occupational illness, damage to property, damage to the work environment, or a combination of these. Explanation. The core of understanding ISO 45001/2018 lies in its defined terms. The standard explicitly defines hazard as a source of or situation with the potential to cause harm, injury, occupational illness, damage to property, damage to the work environment, or a combination of these. This definition is fundamental to identifying and assessing risks within an organization's operations. An auditor must be able to distinguish this from related concepts. For instance, risk is the effect of uncertainty on objectives, which in the context of OHS means the combination of the likelihood of an occurrence and the severity of the injury or ill health that could result. Near miss refers to an incident where no injury or ill health occurred, but there was potential for it. Unsafe condition is a physical or environmental factor that has the potential to cause harm, injury, or ill health, which is a component of a hazard but not the hazard itself. Therefore, the most accurate and encompassing definition of a hazard, as per the standard's terminology, is a source or situation with the potential to cause harm, injury, occupational illness, damage to property, damage to the work environment, or a combination of these. Question 25. During an audit of a manufacturing facility, an auditor is evaluating the effectiveness of the organization's process for identifying and assessing occupational health and safety risks, as required by ISO 45001/2018. The auditor has reviewed the documented hazard register and risk assessment forms to further validate the process and gather comprehensive objective evidence. Which combination of audit techniques would provide the most robust insight into the actual implementation and worker involvement in this critical OHS management system activity? Option A. Observing workers performing tasks, interviewing frontline supervisors about their involvement in risk assessments, and reviewing records of worker suggestions for hazard control implementation. Option B. Examining the minutes of OHS committee meetings, interviewing the external OHS consultant who assisted with risk assessments, and reviewing the legal register for relevant OHS legislation. Option C. Conducting a walkthrough of the facility to identify any obvious hazards not listed in the register, and interviewing the OHS manager about the risk assessment methodology. Option D. Reviewing the organization's OHS policy examining training records for OHS representatives, and analyzing incident investigation reports from the past year. The correct answer is A. Observing workers performing tasks, interviewing frontline supervisors about their involvement in risk assessments, and reviewing records of worker suggestions for hazard control implementation. Explanation. The auditor's objective is to gather evidence about the effectiveness of the organization's hazard identification and risk assessment process. This involves understanding how potential dangers are identified, evaluated for their severity and likelihood, and how control measures are determined and implemented. To achieve this, an auditor must triangulate information from multiple sources. Document review provides the documented procedures and records of past assessments. Observation allows the auditor to see the process in action, how workers interact with their environment, and if controls are being used as intended. Interviews with workers and supervisors reveal their understanding of the process, their involvement in it, and their perception of the effectiveness of controls. A key aspect of ISO 45001 is worker participation and consultation. Therefore, when assessing the hazard identification and risk assessment process, the auditor must verify that workers are actively involved in identifying hazards, assessing risks, and suggesting controls. This involvement ensures that the process is practical, relevant, and considers the perspectives of those most exposed to the risks. An auditor would look for evidence of worker input being sought and incorporated into the documented risk assessments and the subsequent implementation of control measures. This demonstrates that the organization is not just following a procedural checklist, but is genuinely engaging its workforce in maintaining a safe and healthy workplace. A core principle of the standard. Question 26. An auditor is reviewing the emergency preparedness and response provisions at a chemical processing plant following a simulated site-wide power outage. The organization's documented emergency plan mandates the use of a specific, dedicated landline telephone for contacting external emergency responders. During the drill, this landline became inoperable due to the simulated power failure. The organization has not established or documented any alternative methods for communicating with external emergency services. Based on the requirements of ISO 45001-2018, what is the most appropriate auditor conclusion regarding the organization's adherence to Clause 8? 2. Emergency preparedness and response. Option A. A minor nonconformity, as the organization has a documented procedure, and the failure during a drill does not necessarily indicate a systemic breakdown in preparedness. Option B. A major nonconformity, as the documented procedure for contacting external emergency services relies on a single point of failure that was demonstrably ineffective during a plausible emergency scenario, failing to ensure the response capability. Option C. No nonconformity, as the organization has a documented procedure for contacting external emergency services, fulfilling the basic requirement of the clause. Option D. A minor nonconformity, because the organization is actively working on developing alternative communication methods, which will be implemented in the next quarter. The correct answer is B. A major nonconformity, as the documented procedure for contacting external emergency services relies on a single point of failure that was demonstrably ineffective during a plausible emergency scenario, failing to ensure the response capability. Explanation. During an audit of a manufacturing facility that handles hazardous chemicals, an auditor is evaluating the organization's emergency preparedness and response procedures. The organization has established protocols for chemical spills, fires, and medical emergencies. However, a review of recent drills reveals that the communication system used to alert off-site emergency services is outdated and relies on a single landline telephone, which was rendered inoperable during a simulated power outage scenario. The organization's documented procedure for contacting external responders is to use this specific landline. ISO 45001-2018 Clause 8. 2. Emergency preparedness and response mandates that organizations establish, implement, and maintain processes to prepare for and respond to potential emergency situations. This includes identifying potential emergency scenarios, developing procedures to prevent and mitigate harm, and regularly testing these procedures. Crucially, the standard requires that the organization retain documented information about its emergency preparedness and response processes and the outcomes of testing these processes. The failure to have a reliable, redundant communication method for contacting external emergency services especially when this is the primary documented method, represents a significant nonconformity with the requirements of Clause 8. 2. Specifically, the organization has not ensured that its emergency response procedures are capable of being effectively implemented in a real-world scenario, as evidenced by the drill failure. The auditor must identify this as a major nonconformity, because it directly impacts the organization's ability to manage significant potential emergencies and protect its workers and the surrounding community. The reliance on a single point of failure for critical external communication undermines the overall effectiveness of the emergency response plan. The organization's documented information regarding this process is therefore incomplete or inaccurate in its depiction of a viable response mechanism. Question 27. During an audit of a chemical manufacturing facility, an auditor observes that while personal protective equipment, PPE, such as respirators, is mandated for workers handling volatile organic compounds, VOC, there is no documented evidence of the organization exploring or implementing engineering controls like local exhaust ventilation or process enclosure to reduce VOC exposure at the source. Considering the principles of ISO 45001, 2018, and general occupational health and safety best practices, what is the most significant deficiency an auditor would likely identify in the organization's OHS management system regarding this specific hazard? Option A. Failure to adequately prioritize the hierarchy of controls in mitigating significant hazards. Option B. Lack of a comprehensive risk assessment for all chemical handling activities. Option C. Insufficient worker training on the proper use of respirators. Option D. Incomplete record-keeping of PPE issuance and maintenance logs. Correct answer is A. Failure to adequately prioritize the hierarchy of controls in mitigating significant hazards. Explanation: the auditor's role in verifying the effectiveness of an OHS management system's response to identified hazards involves assessing the completeness and suitability of the controls implemented. ISO 45001, 2018, Clause 8. 1. 2. Requires organizations to determine and implement controls for hazards. When auditing this, an auditor must go beyond simply checking if a control exists. They must evaluate its adequacy in mitigating the risk to an acceptable level. This includes examining the documented procedure, observing its implementation, and interviewing personnel to confirm understanding and adherence. The auditor also needs to consider the hierarchy of controls, elimination, substitution, engineering controls, administrative controls, and personal protective equipment, as outlined in OHS legislation and best practices, ensuring the organization has prioritized more effective controls. For instance, if a significant noise hazard is identified, the auditor would look for evidence of engineering controls like soundproofing or enclosure of machinery before accepting the sole reliance on PPE. The auditor's report should reflect whether the controls are demonstrably effective in reducing the risk to as low as reasonably practicable (LARP) or an acceptable level, aligning with the organization's risk appetite and legal obligations. This requires a thorough understanding of the specific hazards, the applicable legal framework, and the principles of risk management. Question 28. When auditing an organization's established OHS policy for compliance with ISO 45001-2018, what specific element is paramount for an auditor to verify regarding its content and intent? Option A. The policy includes specific, measurable OHS targets for the next fiscal year and assigns responsibility for their achievement. Option B. The policy is written in simple language and is readily accessible on the company's intranet homepage. Option C. The policy explicitly states a commitment to preventing work-related injury and ill health and includes a framework for setting OHS objectives. Option D. The policy references all relevant national OHS legislation and outlines the procedure for reporting noncompliance. The correct answer is C. The policy explicitly states a commitment to preventing work-related injury and ill health and includes a framework for setting OHS objectives. Explanation: the OHS policy is a foundational element of an occupational health and safety management system, according to ISO 45001-2018 Clause 5. 2. The top management shall establish, implement, and maintain an OHS policy that is appropriate to the purpose and context of the organization and its OHS risks and opportunities. It must provide a framework for setting OHS objectives, include a commitment to the prevention of work-related injury and ill health, and a commitment to fulfilling applicable legal and other requirements. Furthermore, the policy must include a commitment to continual improvement of the OHS management system. An auditor's role is to verify that the policy meets these requirements, is communicated within the organization, and is available to interested parties as appropriate. The policy's effectiveness is not solely determined by its presence, but by its integration into the organization's operations and its ability to drive OHS performance. Therefore, an auditor would assess how the policy reflects the organization's commitment to proactive risk management, worker participation, and compliance with relevant national legislation such as the UK's Health and Safety at Work, etc. Act 1974, which mandates general duties for employers to ensure the health, safety, and welfare at work of all their employees. The policy must also demonstrate a commitment to ongoing review and adaptation to changing circumstances, thereby fostering a culture of continuous improvement in safety performance. Question 29. When auditing an organization's adherence to ISO 45001, 2018, an auditor discovers that the documented OH&S policy and objectives, established in Clause 5, 2, and Clause 6, 2 respectively, appear to be disconnected from the actual operational realities and strategic direction of the company, which clause, if found to be inadequately implemented, would most likely be the root cause of this disconnect, thereby hindering the effective application of the Plan Do Check Act cycle. Option A, Clause 10, 2 Incident and Nonconformity and Corrective Action. Option B, Clause 9, 1 Monitoring, Measurement, Analysis, and Evaluation. Option C, Clause 4, 1 Understanding the organization and its context. Option D, Clause 7, 4 Communication. The correct answer is C, Clause 4, 1 Understanding the organization and its context. Explanation. The core of ISO 45001-2018 is the Plan Do Check Act (PDCA) cycle. Clause 4, 1 Understanding the organization and its context is foundational to the entire management system. It requires an organization to determine external and internal issues that are relevant to its purpose and its strategic direction, and that affect its ability to achieve the intended outcome, S, of its occupational health and safety, O&S, management system. This understanding directly informs the establishment of the OH&S policy and objectives. Without a thorough grasp of these contextual factors, the subsequent planning, implementation, and improvement activities within the PDCA cycle would be misdirected or ineffective. For instance, if an organization fails to identify a new legislative requirement, an external issue, or a change in its workforce demographics, an internal issue, in Clause 4, 1. Its risk assessment, Clause 6, 1, 2. And operational planning, Clause 8, 1 might not adequately address emerging hazards or vulnerabilities, thereby undermining the effectiveness of the OH&S management system. Therefore, the initial identification and understanding of contextual issues are paramount for the successful application of the PDCA cycle and the achievement of OH&S objectives. Question 30. An auditor reviewing an organization's OH&S management system under ISO 45001, 2018, encounters a situation where the organization has extensively documented its legal obligations related to workplace safety, but has given minimal consideration to emerging societal expectations regarding mental well-being in the workplace. Which aspect of the context of the organization Clause 4, 1 is most likely to be inadequately addressed, and what is the primary implication for the OH&S management system's effectiveness? Option A, overemphasis on economic external factors, resulting in a lack of investment in preventative OH&S measures. Option B, failure to adequately consider social and cultural external issues, potentially leading to a system that does not address psychosocial risks comprehensively. Option C, insufficient analysis of internal technological advancements, hindering the organization's ability to implement modern safety controls. Option D, incomplete identification of stakeholder needs and expectations, particularly regarding regulatory compliance for physical hazards. The correct answer is B, failure to adequately consider social and cultural external issues, potentially leading to a system that does not address psychosocial risks comprehensively. Explanation. The core of understanding the context of the organization in ISO 45001, 2018 lies in identifying and analyzing both internal and external issues that can impact the organization's ability to achieve its intended outcomes for its occupational health and safety (O&S) management system. This clause 4.1 mandates that organizations determine external issues such as legal, technological, competitive, market, cultural, social, and economic environments, as well as internal issues like organizational culture, knowledge, performance, processes, and structures. The auditor's role is to verify that this determination has been conducted systematically and that the identified issues are relevant to the organization's OH&S objectives and its overall strategic direction. The analysis should consider how these issues could positively or negatively affect the OH&S performance and the effectiveness of the OH&S management system. For instance, a new national regulation regarding hazardous substance exposure, external issue, would directly influence the organization's risk assessment and control measures for chemical handling, internal impact. Similarly, a decline in employee morale and engagement, internal issue, could lead to increased unsafe behaviors, impacting OH&S performance. The effectiveness of the OH&S management system is directly linked to how well these contextual factors are understood and integrated into its planning and operation. Therefore, an auditor would look for evidence that the organization has a process for identifying, reviewing, and updating these issues as part of its ongoing OH&S management.